To save his granddaughter, a craftsman sold his last connection to his late wife, a classic wooden boat. He thought it was a silent sacrifice. He was wrong. The entire lake was about to roar his name. The mist rose from Cedar Lake like a ghost, curling around the stilts of the old boathouse. Inside, bathed in the soft, solitary light of a single bare bulb, Art Pendleton was performing his morning ritual. At 72, the former Navy Seabee moved with the quiet deliberation of a man who understood the nature of wood, its strength, its grain, its memory. His workshop, fragrant with the scent of cedar shavings and varnish, was his sanctuary. But the heart of this sanctuary was floating gently in the slip below. It was a 1965 Chris-Craft Super Sport, a 19-foot masterpiece of mahogany and chrome that Art had spent 3 years restoring. He had named her the Eleanor, for his late wife. To an outsider, it was a boat. To Art, it was a living vessel of his past, the keeper of his most cherished memories. Every morning, he'd descend the wooden steps, a soft cloth in hand, and wipe the phantom dew from her gleaming hull. His hands, gnarled from a lifetime of carpentry, knew every curve, every joint, every brass fitting. He knew the satisfying thud of the hatch, the solid click of the chrome cleats. He knew the spot on the dash where Eleanor had spilled a drop of coffee during their trip to see the autumn colors across the lake, a tiny imperfection only he could see. Her favorite sun hat still rested on the shelf above the workbench, holding its shape as if she had just set it down. Eleanor had been gone for 3 years, taken by a quiet illness that had moved with the swift, unsparing force of a winter storm. This boat, this collection of wood and steel and memory, was all he had left of their adventures. He hadn't started the engine in months. He didn't need to hear its deep, throaty rumble to remember. He just needed to be near her. "Grandpa? Are you talking to the boat again?" Art turned, a gentle smile creasing the corners of his eyes. His 8-year-old granddaughter, Chloe, stood at the top of the steps, her small frame silhouetted against the morning light. Her dark hair was a delightful mess, and she clutched a well-loved sketchbook to her chest. She had been staying with him more often while her father, Mark, worked double shifts at the local mill. "Just checking on things, sweetheart," he said, his voice a low, comforting rasp. Chloe navigated the steps carefully, her movements slightly stiff. She knew this boat was sacred ground. "Daddy says Grandma Eleanor loved this boat more than anything." "Almost," Art corrected softly. "She loved our family more." But this was a close second. He lifted Chloe onto the plush red leather of the passenger seat, the same seat where Eleanor had sat for over 30 years, her laughter echoing across the water. For a fleeting, painful moment, he could almost see her there, her hand resting on his as he guided the boat through the waves. But the peace of the morning was a fragile thing. Art didn't know it yet, but a tide of impossible choices was rising, and it was about to wash away the foundations of his quiet world, forcing him to decide what a memory was truly worth. Mark arrived an hour later, the strain on his face telling a story before he even spoke. At 34, Art's son looked exhausted, the weight of single fatherhood and mounting fear pressing down on him. He had been raising Chloe alone since his wife left, overwhelmed by the first wave of medical bills that had started 6 months ago with Chloe's diagnosis. They sat on the back porch overlooking the lake, a stack of mail between them. The crisp, official envelopes had become a constant, unwelcome presence. Juvenile idiopathic arthritis. A cruel, invisible thief that attacked Chloe's small joints, causing pain and stiffness, and threatening her future with every flare-up. "Dr. Evans called," Mark began, his voice strained. "Chloe's last blood work, the inflammation markers are high again. He said the current medication isn't holding her back anymore. He wants to put her on a biologic drug." Art waited, his hands still smelling faintly of wood polish and lake water. He knew what came next. Mark pushed a brochure across the table. "It's a new treatment. Very effective. It could put her into remission, prevent permanent joint damage." He took a deep, shaky breath. "It costs $20,000 for a 6-month course of treatment. The number hung in the air, heavy and obscene. Insurance, Mark continued, the words a bitter recitation of a script they both knew, classifies it as a non-preferred specialty drug. They'll cover less than half. We make too much to qualify for the manufacturer's hardship programs, but not nearly enough to actually pay for it. Art looked past his son's defeated posture, his gaze settling on the backyard. Chloe was sitting on the grass, her sketchbook open in her lap, her movements careful but her spirit undimmed. She was drawing, probably another picture of a boat for his refrigerator. His eyes then drifted further, towards the boathouse, where the polished mahogany hull of the Eleanor was just visible through the open doors. He knew what a boat like that was worth. A 1965 Super Sport, fully restored, with original parts. To the right collector, it could bring $25,000, maybe $30,000. Enough for the medication. Enough to give his granddaughter a chance to run and play like other children. Enough to buy her a future free from pain. He remembered Eleanor's words, spoken softly in a hospital room years ago as she looked at a photo of Chloe. Wood holds memories, Art, she'd said, but family holds a living soul. I already lost my girl, Art said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I'm not going to lose this one, too. Mark's head snapped up, his eyes wide with confusion and a dawning, heartbreaking realization. Dad, what are you saying? No. We'll figure something else out. I'll get a third job. But Art already knew. There was only one option that was fast enough, sure enough. There was only one thing he owned that held enough value. It would cost him the last tangible piece of his wife, the very soul of his past. And it was a price he was willing to pay. That evening, the boathouse felt less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb. Art sat in the captain's chair of the Eleanor, the worn leather cool against his skin. He opened a small, locked compartment in the dashboard, a place he hadn't looked in for 3 years. Inside, tucked beneath an old navigation chart, was a folded piece of paper in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. Her secret note. My dearest Art, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably sitting in this beautiful boat feeling sorry for yourself. Stop it. Here's what you do next, you keep living. You keep loving. You take care of our family. The best parts of our journey aren't in this wood and chrome, my love. They're in your heart, and that's where I'll always be. Now go make some new memories. Art folded the note, his fingers tracing her name. She had always been the practical one, her love a fierce, protective force. She would have sold the boat in a heartbeat. Knowing that didn't make the choice any less painful. He picked up his phone and dialed the number for Lakeside Marina and Brokerage. My name is Arthur Pendleton, he said, his voice steady. I have a 1965 Chris-Craft I need to sell. The next morning, Art took the Eleanor out for one last voyage. He guided her slowly across the glass-like surface of the lake, the V8 engine purring its deep, familiar song. He passed the quiet cove where he'd proposed to Eleanor, the sandy beach where they'd taught Mark to swim. He opened her up one last time in the open water, the wind whipping past his ears, and for a moment, he closed his eyes and could swear he heard Eleanor's joyous laughter beside him. When he returned, he piloted the boat not to his boathouse, but to the marina on the other side of the lake. Lakeside Marina was a sprawling complex where dreams were bought and sold. The owner, a man named Henderson, was a straight shooter who understood that classic boats were more than just assets. My God, Arthur, she's beautiful, Henderson said, running a hand over the flawless varnish. A 65 Super Sport, in this condition. I haven't seen one this clean in years. Garage kept her whole life, Art said, the lye tasting like ash. Regular maintenance. All original. Henderson walked around the boat, his expert eye noting the details that collectors would pay for. Mind if I ask why you're selling? Art hesitated, the truth feeling too raw to speak. But there was a kindness in the man's eyes. My granddaughter, he said simply. She needs medication. This is the only way. Henderson gave a slow, understanding nod. He'd heard stories like this before. Let me make some calls. I think I know a collector who'd appreciate what he's getting. While Henderson was on the phone, a young man in greasy coveralls approached, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked no older than 20, with an open, honest face and eyes that shone with genuine admiration. "Sir, is this your boat?" he asked. "It was," Art replied, the words catching in his throat. The young man introduced himself as Liam. He studied Art's face with a perception that went beyond his years. "You don't look like a man who wanted to sell. Want and need aren't always the same thing, son." Liam nodded slowly, his gaze drifting from Art to the boat and back again, filing away the details of the quiet, heartbreaking transaction. "She's a work of art," he said softly. "I hope whoever gets her knows what they have." Henderson returned with good news and paperwork. A collector in Chicago had agreed to the price. $28,000. Enough for Chloe's medication, with a cushion for whatever came next. Art signed the papers with a hand that trembled slightly, took the check that felt both like salvation and a death certificate, and walked away from the Eleanor without looking back. Liam couldn't get the old man out of his head. All afternoon, as he worked on modern fiberglass hulls and noisy outboard motors, the image of Arthur Pendleton's quiet dignity haunted him. The way he'd signed the papers, like a captain surrendering his ship, the profound sadness in his eyes as he'd walked away from a vessel that was clearly a part of his soul. That evening, sitting in his small apartment, Liam logged onto a website called The Wooden Keel. It was the largest online forum for classic boat enthusiasts, a digital gathering place for restorers, historians, and dreamers across the country who shared a passion for wood and water. After a moment's hesitation, he started a new thread. The title was simple, "A True Craftsman." His post was brief and heartfelt. "Brothers and sisters of the Keel. I met a man today at the marina where I work. An older gentleman, a Navy vet and a master woodworker named Arthur. He sold his 1965 Chris Craft Super Sport, a boat he'd restored himself, named after his late wife. It was pristine, a real work of art. He sold it to pay for his 8-year-old granddaughter's medical treatments. He had to choose between his memories and his family's future. He chose his family without a second thought. I just thought you should know what a real woody boater looks like. That's all." He hit post and went to bed, not expecting much. By the time he woke up, the ripple had become a wave. The thread had hundreds of replies. "That's a man who understands the code. The boat is for the family, not the other way around. My God. I know what goes into a restoration like that. It's a piece of his soul. Someone get me this man's story. Community takes care of community. What's the granddaughter's condition? What does she need?" Within hours, Liam's post had been shared to the Chris Craft Antique Boat Club Forum, the Century Boat Club page, and a dozen other regional associations. The story resonated deeply within a community that understood craftsmanship, legacy, and love. This wasn't just about a boat, it was about a craftsman's sacrifice, a veteran's honor, a family facing a broken healthcare system. It was about values every single one of them held sacred. Chapter presidents of boating clubs started making calls. Fundraising coordinators for maritime museums began checking their emergency accounts. A restorer in Michigan posted that he had a derelict 65 Super Sport hull sitting in his barn, a project he never got to. An engine specialist in Ohio offered to rebuild a V8 for free. An upholsterer in Wisconsin pledged to donate the classic red leather. What had started as one young man's simple post, an act of bearing witness to another man's pain, was becoming a movement. A secret, nationwide conspiracy of kindness was taking shape, a plan that would culminate in a way Arthur Pendleton could never have imagined. 2 weeks after the sale, Art was sitting on his dock, teaching Chloe how to tie a proper cleat hitch. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn, and the empty boathouse behind them felt like a hollow ache in his chest. It was then that he heard it. It started as a low, distant thrum, a sound his experienced ear couldn't quite place. It wasn't a lone fishing boat or a ski boat. It was deeper, more resonant. A chorus. It grew steadily louder, the unmistakable, throaty burble of multiple classic inboard engines. "Grandpa, what's that noise?" Chloe asked, looking up from the rope. Art stood, shading his eyes as he looked out across the lake. At first, he saw one. A gleaming wooden boat, its bow cutting a clean V through the water. Then another appeared behind it, and another. Soon, the horizon was filled with them. A fleet. He counted 10, then 20, then 50. Chris Crafts, Centuries, Rivas, Gar Woods, a majestic flotilla of floating art, all heading directly for his dock. They moved in a slow, respectful procession, their polished mahogany hulls glowing like amber in the afternoon light. The sound of their engines was overwhelming, a beautiful, thunderous symphony of respect. Neighbors began to emerge from their houses, phones in hand, drawn by the impossible spectacle. The lead boat, a stunning Chris-Craft Riviera, pulled up to Art's dock and cut its engine. The sudden silence was deafening. The young man at the helm was Liam. "Mr. Pendleton," he called out, his voice filled with emotion. "Are you Arthur Pendleton?" Art could only nod, utterly bewildered. "Sir, word of what you did spread through the boating community," Liam said, gesturing to the armada that now filled the water in front of the house. "From here to the coasts, people have been talking about the grandfather who chose love over varnish. These people came because they understand sacrifice. And they believe a man who makes your kind of choice deserves better than an empty boathouse." A large, flat-topped barge, towed by a workboat, pulled up behind the flotilla. On it, covered by a heavy blue tarp, was the unmistakable silhouette of a 1965 Chris-Craft Supersport. "Mr. Pendleton," Liam said, his voice cracking slightly. "The community would like to return something to you." Several men from the other boats hopped onto the barge and began untying the tarp. They pulled it away, revealing a motorcycle that gleamed as if it were forged from sunlight. A 1965 Super Sport, identical to the Eleanor, but somehow, more. Every piece of chrome was perfect, every plank of wood flawless. As Art stepped closer, his knees grew weak. This wasn't just a restoration, it was a tribute. Engraved in flowing script on a small brass plaque on the dashboard were the words, "For Eleanor's Art. From the community." Stitched into the new red leather of the captain's chair was a simple, elegant E. And mounted just below the glove box was a small, waterproof speaker, ready for a new generation of music. Art's vision blurred as he traced the engraved plaque with a trembling finger. "The hull was restored in Michigan," Liam explained softly. "The engine was rebuilt in Ohio. The upholstery came from Wisconsin. Every person who touched this boat knew they were helping to rebuild something sacred." Chloe, drawn by the beautiful machine, appeared at Art's side. "Grandpa," she whispered in awe. "Is it ours?" Art couldn't speak. He knelt and pulled his granddaughter into a fierce hug, his tears finally falling freely. Liam reached into his jacket. "There's one more thing." He handed Art a thick envelope. "We took up a collection. There's enough in here to cover Chloe's medication for the next 3 years, with plenty left over for whatever else she needs." Art finally found his voice. I can't accept this. This is too much." "Mr. Pendleton," Liam said, his eyes shining. "You gave up your soul for your family. This isn't charity. This is brotherhood." One by one, other boaters piloted their vessels closer to the dock. An older woman with silver hair, at the helm of a beautiful Riva Ariston, called out, "Arthur. I lost my husband 2 years ago. We spent our lives on these boats. When I heard your story, I knew he would have wanted to be part of this." A young man in a Coast Guard sweatshirt approached in a small wooden dinghy. "Sir, my own daughter has battled juvenile arthritis. We know the fight. The boating community helped us then. It's our honor to pay it forward. They were strangers, bound by a shared passion and a common code of honor. They understood, in a way few others could, the depth of Art's sacrifice. "Grandpa," Chloe whispered, tugging on his sleeve. "Can we go for a ride?" Art looked at his granddaughter, her eyes wide with excitement, then at the fleet of angels surrounding his home. He looked at the new boat, a vessel not of memory, but of overwhelming love and community. He lifted Chloe onto the seat, settling her in front of him. The engine started with a perfect, deep-throated roar. As they pulled away from the dock, a cheer went up from the flotilla, and dozens of boat horns sounded in a joyous, chaotic salute. They moved slowly through the parade of chrome and mahogany, Chloe's laughter echoing across the water, pure and unrestrained. Neighbors lined the shore, many in tears, all witnessing a moment of grace that would become a local legend. When they returned, the boaters began to disperse, but not before each one came by to shake Art's hand, to share a story, to offer a quiet word of support. Liam was the last to leave. "Art, there's something else," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "Your original boat. The Eleanor. Henderson, the broker, he tracked her down. The collector in Chicago who bought her. He's on our forum. He heard the whole story. He's shipping her back next week. He said, some boats only have one captain. They both belong with you." As the sun set over Cedar Lake, Art sat in his boathouse. It was no longer empty. It was a harbor, home to 2 beautiful wooden boats and the echo of 100 new friends. Chloe was on the dock, taping a new drawing to the piling. It showed a man and a little girl on a gleaming boat, with a smiling angel flying alongside them. "That's you, me, and Grandma Eleanor," she explained. "Now we can all go boating together." Art pulled his granddaughter close, his heart overflowing. He finally understood. Eleanor was right. The best parts of the journey were never just in the wood or the water. They were in the love that connects one generation to the next, and in a community that can turn a stranger's quiet sacrifice into a triumphant, roaring chorus of angels. If this story touched your heart, let us know what you think in the comments. We all belong to communities, big and small, that have the power to lift us up. Please, share your stories and always comment with respect. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that restore your faith in humanity.